Bueno, vamos a dar inicio a la conferencia inaugural que nos va a presentar Ray Edmonson. Voy a dar una breve reseña curricular de él. Él escribe, imparte conferencias y cursos de formación a nivel internacional en el ámbito de los archivos audiovisuales. Su obra más conocida es Filosofía y Principio de los Archivos Audiovisuales, que fue publicada por la UNESCO en 2004. Sus publicaciones han sido traducidas a 10 lenguas. Desde 1996 ha ocupado diferentes cargos en el programa Memoria del Mundo de la UNESCO. Actualmente es miembro del Comité Australiano y el Subcomité de Registro de IAC y presidente anterior y actual consejero especial de MOCA. Empezó su carrera en archivos en la sección de películas de la Biblioteca Nacional de Australia en 1968, de la cual finalmente se convirtió en su director. Estuvo estrechamente involucrado en la creación del National Films and Sound Archives of Australia en 1984. Fue director de esta institución en 2001, después curador emérito. Su tesis doctoral describe el proceso histórico de creación de esta institución. En 1987 fue premiado con la medalla de la Orden de Australia. Ha recibido reconocimientos por parte de la Asociación de Imágenes de Archivistas del sureste perdón, es muy largo el título, por sus siglas SEAP, por los pioneros de cine en Australia, por la Asociación de Archivistas de Australia y por la Asociación Brasileña para la Preservación Audiovisual. Actualmente es director de la Asociación de Archivos. Bienvenido, Ray. Welcome to Mexico. If you want to open and speak.
Gracias. Buenos días. I'll speak in English. We tend to view history and societal change retrospectively in technological epochs like the Stone Age or the Bronze Age, or closer to the present, the Industrial Revolution, the Atomic Age and the Space Age. We drop such terminology once the new reality becomes commonplace. Sound films were called talkies when they first appeared in the late 1920s, but the term was dropped within a few years when all films had become talkies. The changes these ages usher in are permanent. Society reshapes itself around the new reality. It surprises me, though, that people still say we are in the digital age, as if it is a novelty. It's hardly that. It began before any of us were born. Surely by now, the term is redundant. There's a long road of digital evolution which includes Charles Babbage's analytical engine of 1837, the direct ancestor of today's computers, and the Jacquard loom of 1801, which used a punched card system to cause weaving looms to reproduce pre-designed patterns in the cloth. IBM's punch card tabulators in the 1940s were an adaptation of the same idea. By the late 19th century, Jacquard's concept had led to the paper music roll or cardboard music book, which actuated mechanical musical instruments such as orchestrions and the once widespread player piano. Piano rolls were produced for a mass market, especially in Europe and North America, and perhaps surprisingly in my own country, Australia, where production only ceased as late as 2005. In the instrument's most sophisticated form, the reproducing piano, as it was known, he converted the decidedly analogue performance of the pianist, with all its nuances, into binary code via punched holes on the paper roll. The roll could be played back to exactly reproduce the performance. Furthermore, the roll could be replicated and the copies would be clones of the original. There was no loss of information. The history of sound recording demonstrates how analogue technology overshadowed the digital for decades. More recently, it has been the turn of the digits to fight back. Is there any area of life which the digital revolution has not touched? The word processor has replaced the typewriter. Telephones have become unwired and mobile. Emails and texting have replaced letter writing. Consequently, Traditional postal services are declining, and the ubiquitous public telephone box, an increasingly redundant feature of the urban landscape. Social media has opened up new means of personal connectivity. Everyone has to have a Facebook page. Public figures have Twitter accounts with uncountable thousands of followers. We go shopping by internet instead of going to a bricks and mortar store. The book encyclopedia, the fount of knowledge, once updated every few years, is now dead. The daily printed newspaper is slowly following as the e-version takes over. Wikipedia and its fellows are instantly accessible and updated by the minute, just like e-news. We can Google for an instant answer on anything. We pay our bills by phone, internet, or swiping a credit card, and we check our bank balances online. The net is converting money from a tangible to an abstract concept. Cinemas now project digital images, not film. Our personal cameras are our iPhones, and our photo albums are our laptops. CDs replace vinyl, and DVDs replaced VHS. In turn, they are giving way to downloaded streaming sites and services. Computer chips are everywhere, in our cars, our household appliances, hearing aids, and they are now being surgically embedded in people. They can be read and programmed externally. This is indeed a brave new connected world. Companies like Google, Apple and Microsoft have made vast fortunes. And for our iPhones, iPads and laptops to work properly, they must be connected to the web, where some of the software resides and where we back up our data into the cloud from whence, hopefully, it can be retrieved. Is there a downside to all this? Without realising it, we become beholden and vulnerable to huge commercial enterprises and government bureaucracies which are accumulating vast amounts of data about our identities, our creditworthiness, our shopping preferences, our social contacts and our daily activities. When you install some new software, do you read the fine print on the online contract, or do you just tick the box? How much of yourself do you reveal on your Facebook page? Have you thought about the risks? The initial promises of this brave new world, like the paperless office and teleworking, never really arrived, and the technology has evolved so fast that the world is awash in e-waste. Redundant mobile telephones, desktop computers, screens and other paraphernalia. They are now an environmental problem. Every day our email accounts, we fight our way through a deluge of spam, which accounts for 70% of all traffic, and the entrapment of bogus bank messages and offers from strange sources of great financial riches. It's opened up a new landscape of trickery, from identity theft to fraud and deception, as the recent scandal about toxic emissions from Volkswagen cars have made plain. We have to replace our devices constantly because they date so quickly. And while we have them, we must also constantly update their operating systems. It's very time-consuming. If that isn't enough, we have to keep track of a vast tree of logins and passwords which also have to be maintained to prevent our personal records being hijacked. How often has your credit card or email account been hacked? And how much time did you have to spend on the consequences? The digital age has also brought a new kind of guerrilla war. It began with viruses, but it's evolved into a vast global chess game played in deadly earnest as governments, corporations engage in cyber warfare, eavesdropping, bugging, infecting and mining each other's databases and networks. If you need guidance with your computer problems, your first port of call is your children. They have grown up in the digital environment and it envelops them. Now there are even detox courses for young people who become so addicted to living in the online world that they've literally lost touch with reality. Although we in the archiving field know otherwise, there is still a wide public and political perception that digital equates with cheap, modern and permanent, which suggests that preservation has become much simpler. For example, there are service providers who offer to transfer your old 8mm home movies to DVD, promising your DVD will last for hundreds of years, while your film will fade away. They don't ask whether you'll still be able to buy DVD players a couple of decades from now. At its most extreme, this mythology has led to the assertion that we won't even need archival institutions in the future. They'll all be replaced by a big database. I've heard this seriously argued at professional conferences. Demonstrating our raison d'etre, something of course we've always had to do, will become no less a requirement for archives in the future. As we know, there are a number of factors that can cause data to degrade, including leakage in solid-state devices, gradual loss of magnetic orientation in magnetic carriers, and breakdown or disk rot in optical media. Software also degrades, changes in the hardware environment, bugs, evolution and software entropy. We have to maintain the integrity of data and its permanent accessibility. The management of data and software becomes a constant and growing financial obligation for audiovisual archives. It has been argued that digitisation is a great democratiser, and in one sense this is true. If a document of any kind, be it text, image or audio, has been digitised and made accessible through the internet, it's available to everyone. You don't have to journey to the office of the archive to hear or see it. This has dramatically reduced geographic barriers to access and research, and with YouTube, Facebook and their siblings, the internet has become a wonderland of images and sounds to be trawled for new discoveries. Wise archives and entities like the World Digital Library are using the net to open up their collections to vast new audiences. But where there is action, there is reaction. This accessibility has been accompanied by an extension of intellectual property laws, as copyright owners have realised the commercial potential of their backlogs and libraries and increasingly control access for their own benefit. Ironically, while the recordings are being preserved at public expense in archives, it is the copyright holders who reap the commercial benefit. And curiously, this wonderland of choice on the net has been taking the research into shallow rather than deeper waters. I call it the net effect. We now have a generation who become so used to instant gratification that they assume that whatever is not a net doesn't exist. Archives can only combat this trend by digitising their collections and developing and promoting online catalogues on their own user-friendly websites. Yet this democratisation has not worked for everyone. In reality, the move to the diverse digital environment has only further segmented the world into haves and have-nots. It's called the digital divide. Put bluntly, it deepens the existing gap between developed and developing countries. At one end of the spectrum, in rich countries like Denmark, Sweden and Norway, over 94% of the population use the internet. At the other end, in poor countries like Myanmar and Timor-Leste, it's just over 1%. I've recently visited both countries and I've seen firsthand the obstacles they face in terms of infrastructure, education, information literacy and economics. They are formidable. It's hard to imagine how they can ever catch up as the rest of the world races onwards. Overlaying this divide are the political and commercial considerations. For their own reasons, governments decide what parts of the net are off limits. In China, you cannot access Google, and along with some other countries, including Iran and Syria, Facebook is also banned. In North Korea, internet access is limited to a tiny government-approved elite. And anywhere in the world, digital content and software providers like Netflix, Amazon, iTunes, Microsoft and so on determine how much of their proprietary material you can access, how long you can keep it, and what you will pay for it. Finally, let's consider the inertia effect. At the personal level, while our devices and our software constantly change, the data we have accumulated easily gets left behind. We may never get around to transferring it, or it may become irretrievable, or it can be lost in a device failure like a hard disk crash. But even if none of these things occur, the sheer quantity of emails, photos, text documents and the rest becomes self-defeating. Maintaining an organised personal database takes time and discipline. How many of us manage it? In the days of film cameras, the number of photos you took of, say, a family outing was limited by cost and the 36 picture capacity of the roll of film. Today the same event can result in scores, maybe hundreds, of shots on your iPhone. Do you review them and select the ones to keep? Or do you just put off the task for another day? And how many of the photos will survive for as long as the old family album your grandparents bequeathed you? At the institutional level, the inertia effect is far larger. While the rate varies from archive to archive, we are not digitising threatened analogue material in our collections fast enough to keep up with the loss of skills and transfer technology. We are set to lose a significant percentage of what we already hold. and the dilemmas of choice are only increasing as standards and formats constantly change, demands on storage capacity relentlessly increases, and we have to spend time to select from a deluge of new content. We become accustomed to thinking of digital and analog as mutually exclusive domains. I think the reality is more complex. The world around us is best described as analog. Time is analog. It proceeds continuously. We can express time digitally by breaking it into arbitrarily discrete numerical values, yet that does not change its nature. Digital information might be described as an idealized abstraction of physical reality. Hence, the Roman alphabet can be described as a digital system. So could movable type. The keys of a piano are a digital system. So is Western musical notation. At least apart from non-discrete instructions such as adagio, forte and legato. While the fingerboard of a violin, being fretless and continuous, is analog, the fingerboard of a guitar is digital, divided by frets into discrete notes. Western music itself is built deliberately around select wavelengths. Is it thereby digital, or partly so? When it comes to motion pictures, what we would normally describe as analog film is actually a hybrid. The film emulsion is analog, since its particles are distributed organically and randomly. Unlike digital pixels, they cannot be numerically counted, but the individual frames are countable and digital in concept. They are a sampling of a photographing objective at the rate of 24 a second. The impression of movement relies on the phenomenon of persistence of vision. Digital information itself, of necessity, is stored on analog devices which may be subject to electrical leakage or mechanical malfunction. Digitization is usually taken to mean the migration of content by digital means from an analog carrier, so described, into a surrogate digital file. In the process, some sonic or visual information is lost, despite best efforts to minimize it. In the process, the nature of the intellectual work has changed. A pixel-based copy of the analog images on motion picture film has a different visual texture. In the digitizing process, the link between content and carrier, and context when it's relevant, is broken. To that extent, the work itself has changed. As Marshall McLuhan famously said, the medium is the message. Many image and sound carriers are artifacts, and their physical nature has shaped the creative form of the recorded work which they contain. They are information-bearing objects, and much of the information they hold exists outside the visual and sonic content. This is a discussion I won't pursue here, but it does emphasise the importance of recognising the artefact value of carriers and not focusing solely on the content. Audiovisual archives as recognisable entities have been around for more than a century. Somehow I don't think they're about to be replaced by some vast impersonal database. The human element will always matter. Expertise in selection and collection development, in the provision of access, and in the standards and practicalities of preservation. Because there will always be a physical aspect of our work. The need to preserve analogue originals, to preserve the historical progression of technology, to present collections in the right context and surroundings, to make them relevant to new generations. Most archives will always be real places and not virtual ones. Preservation depends on institutional continuity and stability, and hence on the values, standards, scholarship, skills, corporate memory, and ethos which that engenders. How do we protect that continuity from the uncertainties of political change? How effectively do we advocate for the growth, funding and awareness of our institutions in a world where simplistic and cheaper alternatives seem to lurk around every corner? Are our collections and services accessible enough to justify continued financial support? For it is access, not preservation, that the public sees and helps to develop a supportive constituency. We have accumulated by experience, trial and error, a great deal of knowledge about the preservation of what we now call legacy formats, analogue tapes and discs, film and paper. Although some are now turning out not to be legacy formats at all. We understand, I hope, the crucial importance of preserving the original for its lifetime. And carrier breakdown or content retrievability requires migration. The preservation pathways are now analogue to digital. Born digital works, of course, always need to be preserved in digital form, irrespective of future uncertainties. But what do we know about the long-term sustainability and retrievability of digital formats? We've learned by experience of the risks, about what can fail, and about surviving in a constantly evolving software and hardware environment. But let's be reminded of the concept of entropy, which arises from the second law of thermodynamics. Entropy is a measure of the state of disorder of a system. Digital storage media are highly complex and a very ordered means of information storage. They're very vulnerable to entropy. In print, celluloid, vinyl and shellac media, entropy is slower. Analogue seem to be relatively neglect tolerant. Archives make an implicit commitment to refresh the digital files every 5 years or so. If they don't, they could rapidly lose their collections. We need to hold that thought in tension with analogue reality. Properly stored films and discs can last hundreds of years without refreshment. Even badly stored and with no management attention, experience shows they can often survive for many decades. The analogue holdings that archives now care for are what have survived the disruptions and destructions of 2 world wars, countless other conflicts, economic depressions, revolutions, invasions, market forces, pillage and simple neglect. So much for the 20th century. Now in the 21st century, we are making a wager on the digital future. We're betting that somehow the social, technological and political conditions of this century will be different. They will be stable and reliable enough to ensure that around the world, the audiovisual heritage will be refreshed every 5 years and will survive whatever viruses, cyber attacks or hijacking that might be pitted against it. That's every 5 years forever, until some other, as yet unimagined, technology takes over. We know we have no choice but to do what archives have always done, collectively confront the challenge and find solutions. We'll favour open source software so that we aren't held hostage to the mega proprietors. We'll strive to educate and dispel mythology. We'll collaborate in international projects like Interpares and Persist. We will advocate legislation that underpins our activities and our professional independence and enables fair and universal access to our collections. And we will seek stable, permanent and realistic funding for our institutions. Preservation is a term much misused even by archivists. Here's the standard UNESCO definition. Preservation is the totality of things necessary to ensure the permanent accessibility forever of an audiovisual document with the maximum integrity. And there are many definitions of digital preservation. You just have to Google the term. Here's one authoritative one. Digital preservation combines policies, strategies and actions to ensure access to reformatted and more digital content regardless of the challenges of media failure and technological change. The goal of digital preservation is the accurate rendering of authenticated content over time. Does the first definition implicitly embrace the second or not? And does preservation have different conceptual timeframes? Short term, medium term, forever? It's an open question that could occupy many hours of discussion, but let's be clear about one thing. Preservation is an ongoing task, not a finite one. Nothing has ever been preserved, it's only being preserved. In the digital realm, that's fundamentally and constantly true. To digitise for access is to most conveniently meet current demand. To digitise for preservation is to lock in standards and assumptions that will be overtaken by technological progression. Whether or not we're still in the digital age, some commentators believe we've moved on to the post-digital age. This is not a denial of the immense changes that digital technology has made and will continue to make to society, but it is a paradigm shift which no longer sees digital as being synonymous with progress. It reflects a disenchantment with digital information systems and media gadgets, and a disconnection with the intrusive global digital networking of communication, technical infrastructures, markets, geopolitics and security systems. It sees the assumed dichotomy between digital and analog as false. It seeks to meld the abstractions of digital information systems with the hands-on human realities of the physical analog world. Now, there may be an element of nostalgia in all this, but it's more than that. Perhaps it's best reflected in the dictum of the world's most successful investor, Warren Buffett, who has famously said that he never buys businesses whose operations he doesn't understand. Very few of us understand how a computer really works, and if we don't know how to fix one, if it fails. Most of us understand, however, the workings of the disc turntable, a film projector, many household appliances, and even motor vehicles. When they fail, we might not necessarily have the skill to fix them ourselves, but we can usually understand what needs to be done. It's in this light that we can ponder the resurgence of the vinyl disc and the audio cassette, of the traditional printed book and the age of the e-book. I was present recently when in Canberra a capacity crowd came to the National Film and Sound Archive to witness a musical group making an acoustic cylinder recording and an electrical lacquer disc recording, and to hear them played back. There's something intrinsically fascinating about a highly understandable technology and the creativity involved in exploiting the technology's inbuilt capacities and limitations. Television and the internet have failed to replace the exhilaration of the live concert or the live orator. Skyping has not replaced the need for face-to-face meetings. The mechanical wristwatch with the analog dial is flourishing, and for all the global pervasiveness of electronic banking and credit card use, the production of banknotes is expanding. Instinctively, we have greater trust in money as a physical object than as figures on a computer screen, especially in uncertain times. There's a joke about a tourist in Paris racing into the Louvre and exclaiming, "Quick, I'm double parked, where's the Mona Lisa?" But it underscores a fundamental truth. You can study the detail of this painting much more effectively on a computer screen than in the Louvre itself. Assuming you could fight your way through the crowd which always surrounds it. But a two-dimensional digital surrogate is ultimately no replacement for the real thing. Our challenge is to be at home in the post-digital age. We embrace digital technology for all it offers us and requires of us. Indeed, we have no choice. But we err if we see it as the new versus the old, as one replacing the other. It's not either or, it's both and. What we've recently come to call legacy collections will continue to grow because new works in analog formats will continue to be made. The related skills and technologies will need to be maintained. The challenge of migrating content from deteriorating carriers will remain and grow. It's a race we are losing and will continue to lose without sufficient resources, legislative support, and the key to proprietary software. That points to things like fundraising, publicity and advocacy, but it also points to something that perhaps we have not done so well in the past. I call it the protecting and nurturing intangible heritage of the audiovisual archiving. The transfer of disappearing skills, the capturing of memory through oral history, the growth of training courses, the culture of live events which celebrate our heritage. This develops a diaspora of interested people surrounding our institutions for which volunteer workers, sponsors and fundraisers can be drawn. Despite the best advocacy efforts of our professional associations, we in the collecting professions, archivists, curators, librarians, have an image problem. The media stereotype of the timid, bespectacled librarian is well established, and unfortunately, research confirms that the stereotype has some validity. Studies using personality type inventories, like the Myers-Briggs type indicator and the temperament disorder, give a more nuanced picture than the stereotype that is too close for comfort. In summary, we differ from the general population. We are typed as guardians, dependable, process-driven, methodical managers of goods and services, reliable backroom people, intuitive and introverted. We're among the best educated but the lowest paid. We resist change. We fail to obtain the resources and status needed for our work because the studies actually suggest we are poor advocates for our own cause. We rate 3 times lower on the advocacy scale than the general population. We have a low self-image. We are not political animals and we shy away from confrontation. That doesn't mean we can't be good advocates, it's just not our preference. Skills of advocacy, such as they are, can be learned. It's basically making the effort to reach out to others and relate to people and try to meet their needs every day in the course of our work. Meeting with politicians or fronting media or public speaking might not be our natural preference, but we are all, and I mean all, capable of them. We might feel we're a poor match for professional lobbyists and public relations experts. There's a place for such expertise. But if I were a politician or a journalist, I would much rather listen to an archivist who believes passionately in her work and does it well than to a professional lobbyist who has no such commitment or depth of knowledge. I see the post-digital age for archives as one of widening strategies, skills, technologies and issues. But the history of the audiovisual media itself, our history has always been one of constant adaptation to technological change. In that sense, nothing has changed. The future promises to be an exciting ride that perhaps underway. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Ray, por la brillante conferencia que nos has brindado. Y tenemos unos minutos por si alguno de ustedes desea hacer alguna pregunta. ¿Sí? Un micrófono, por favor.
Hi, thanks for the lecture. I was going to ask you about the problems between legal issues and preserving activities as such. You said that access is the primordial goal in this activity, but copyright issues appear as a barrier between these activities and the access. Would it be legal? How could we make to give more access in the archives for, without leisuring and without harming the copyright side?
This is a large topic, and what you have in any collection will be partly free of copyright, or partly in public domain, or partly there will be no restrictions. Then other things will be under copyright restrictions. I think archives have to observe the law, and so where copyright does not allow the archive to provide access, you have to observe that. And all we can do over time is try to change the law, change the international conventions. This is a large job, and it's been running in the wrong direction for some time. Now, bodies like UNESCO have a stance on copyright. In principle, they say everybody should have access to the public memory. It belongs to all of us. You have to allow the owner of copyright a reasonable control of their material, because they need a financial return of what they make. That's okay. But what's been happening in the last decade or 2 decades is that around the world, the period of copyright control has been growing and growing and growing, because it's to the advantage of the strongest voices in the World Intellectual Property Organization to bring that about. We have to work collectively with bodies like UNESCO to try to move in the other direction. I don't say that's easy, but I think there's the increasing recognition that it's just gone too far. It has to be turned around. So this has always been an issue for us. It's become a bigger issue. I just think that's one of the great tasks we have ahead of us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I had a question. You're bringing up the sort of hybrid world that we're still living in, digital and analog. And then one of your slides on sustainability had ecological sustainability on it. And this makes me start to think about what are the issues that we're going to be dealing with as archivists related to the ecological sustainability of digital archiving. As you mentioned, the digital is always tied to a physical. So in this case, digital archives just aren't ghosts living out there in the universe.
Yeah.
They're on a server somewhere. You showed the picture of the e-waste in the landfill. We have to constantly renew our machinery, our servers. These server farms have a history of being very ecologically damaging. They use a lot of power. They don't use sustainable power sources. They generate a lot of heat. So what do you think is the role of the archivist in the digital world, this hybrid world, to use our role in preserving the digital heritage, but also raising awareness of the impact it has on climate change.
I'm just discussing that with a colleague this morning. Look, it's a huge problem, and that slide is only a tiny indication, because what is happening globally is that disposing of e-waste, it's not getting much attention either, is a global issue. The rich countries are sending all the e-waste to poor countries, where it's disposed of in a horrible way. For example, in Ghana, countries like my own country, Australia, send their stuff to Ghana, where it's burnt to release the copper wires, which are recycled. And all the people living in the vicinity start to die of the fumes and the toxicity, and nobody cares. And you can repeat this around the world. So I think part of our obligation is to try to push for devices that are ecologically sustainable, less damaging, to call attention to that, call attention to the issue, because it's an issue that is as important as any other ecological issue. We have now around the world discussing climate change issues. We're talking about fossil fuels and renewable energy and things like that. This is part of the equation as well, but it's just not terribly visible. And as with all things, it's being driven by economics. The countries that manufacture the devices will do it in the way that's most economical for themselves, and will dispose of things in the way that's most economical for themselves. As in other changes in society, it's only the force that then push back on that to try to turn them around. We have environmental consciousness now because millions of people around the world have joined groups, have run crusades, so on to stop certain things happening. In my own country, in Australia, we have huge fights going on about new coal mines, to stop them being, to stop any new mines starting, and so on. This kind of thing's happening worldwide. It's going to have to happen with e-waste as well.
Question about
Yeah.
Thank you. Very interesting everything that you said. I will have a very specific question. Does the Association of Archives have a training program of some kind that can get to people in Latin America or the rest of the world for training to meet some of those challenges you mentioned?
One of the features, I think, of the last 20 years has been the growth of formal training courses around the world. There are some in Latin America, they're everywhere. I'm involved in a couple myself. Some are campus, so you've got to go to a campus and learn. Some, like one that comes out of Australia, are delivered by internet. The limitation is they all cost money. Or all the ones that I know of cost money. And so people who do them, well, they can afford to do them. So we still have a gap where skills need to be imparted to people who really can't afford to pay for them. And now the various professional associations in our field can provide some help, but they're not terribly rich either. But okay, so that remains, the inevitable problem. Yes, the courses are developing. They weren't there 20 years ago. Now there's quite a number of them, and they provide formal training and practical training in all the range of issues that they've covered. But they need to be affordable. There need to be more of them. They need to spread out to areas where archiving is quite minimal and the skills are minimal. And I can point to many countries around the world where the skills are really, really, really minimal. That's a huge challenge. It will probably have to be driven by the professional associations and the institutions that offer courses. And they'll have to try to get their money from somewhere, from governments, sponsors, don't know. But that the huge need, as in many things, is simply where will the money come from to provide that impetus? Because the awareness and the desire is there, and it just needs to grow a lot faster than it's growing.
Bien, muchas gracias por las preguntas. Thank you, Ray, for your conference. Y enseguida les quiero pedir, please don't vote, desde luego. Les quiero pedir que si me acompañan de pie y déjenme decirles por qué vamos a entregar un reconocimiento a Rey por todo el trabajo y trayectoria profesional que ha desarrollado. Entonces, les pido si me ayudan a traducir. Brevemente digo, Ray Edmonson es conocido por el gremio de los archivistas, por la profesión, como el padre de los archivos sonoros y audiovisuales. Esto de padre a mí me genera un poco de escozor. Yo digo que ha sido un pionero teórico, un pensador, un filósofo al respecto. Sus aportaciones científicas han contribuido al reconocimiento profesional del archivista y han sentado las bases para la discusión teórica y deontológica del deber ser de los archivos sonoros y audiovisuales. Su trabajo ha sido reconocido y valorado por las más importantes asociaciones internacionales de archivos sonoros y audiovisuales, así como por la UNESCO. Para el Instituto de Investigaciones Bibliotecológicas y de la Información, constituye un honor contar con la presencia del Dr. Ray Edmonson en este congreso. Agradecemos y valoramos su presencia, por ello deseo otorgar el siguiente reconocimiento al doctor. Gracias por acompañarnos.